And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the B2B Marketing Playbook. My name's Scott Frymire. I'm your host for this video podcast series, where we dive into some of the pressing questions that you, as an emerging marketing leader, may have about how to best contribute to the growth of your organization. But our audience certainly isn't just limited to marketing leaders. Anybody in the marketing function, any other business professionals who are just interested in hearing more from those leaders out in the B2B SaaS software tech space who have been there, done that, who have the experience and want to share their insights, their perspective on different pressing topics today. And our topic that we're going to talk about today is, what does the sales team really want from the marketing organization? And my guest to address that topic is somebody who thankfully has worked on leading teams on both sides, both the sales and marketing organizations. Started out as an individual contributor, as an account executive, rose to VP of sales and business development, has also served as vice president of marketing teams for several organizations, chief revenue officer, and today is actually a consultant, the virtual CRO, somebody who can come in and help your organization really ramp up their sales and go-to-market motions and help build that engine. So I'm very happy to welcome our guest today, Casey Murray. Casey, welcome to the podcast. Good to see you again.
Scott, great to have me be here. Great to have us connected again. It's been fun, and excited that you're out on this venture, and congrats on your early success. It's been fun.
I appreciate it. And this is certainly a very fun kind of side project I get to work on, getting to talk to people I've connected with before and people I don't know, but those who are like yourself, willing to share their perspective. So I appreciate that. Casey, the first thing that hits me, I mentioned that you've worked as a leader in both sales and marketing organizations for multiple companies. And I just, a quick observation, it's funny, as you look at career paths, very often, if you're somebody on the marketing side, maybe you start out as a digital marketing specialist, and then you rise to be a head of demand gen or a product marketing leader, and then eventual VP of marketing, and so on. On the sales side, sometimes people start out as a business development rep, and they then become an account executive, and then a regional sales manager, and then a vice president of sales. And rarely do the two career paths meet until you get sort of to the top of the pyramid. And if somebody's a chief revenue officer, a chief growth officer, then suddenly they find themselves responsible for both the sales and marketing organization. At least that's my experience. Is that what you see? And why do you think that is? And is there almost like a hindrance to that for the organization?
Yeah, it's a great observation, and it's definitely true. I don't think you see a lot of people blur that responsibility, to your point, until they maybe get to chief revenue. And even then, that's probably still 80% sales revenue driven, but maybe marketing's reporting into them. And I think part of the reason is there are separate skills, and maybe it's a little left brain, right brain as well. I mean, if you're classically a marketer, creative, a little less analytical, a little bit more the art of possible, there is a skill set there. And I think the other thing that is in play, though, is that I think the sales leadership teams are inherently a little bit biased of marketers not knowing how to sell, if they're honest. I think they feel like, hey, you couldn't do what we do. We think we can do what you do. I mean, there's that low bar to entry in terms of, everyone thinks they can write, a marketing email subject line well, which is a shame for all of us marketers to have to fight that. But I think it's a one-way bias where the salespeople would probably make it hard for the marketers to come over and drive sales leadership positions because they feel like it's a different set of skills. So I feel like that's a little unfair. And I probably made the leap in that I started sales and, learned, what that was. But going to marketing, I just had to convince the leadership at that particular company that I could do that. So I was probably lucky. But I was also, and still am, sort of an educational seller, and a wordsmith, even in my sales approach, the English degree that you and I have joked about, I care about the value of each word. So even as a seller, I was probably a little bit more marketing inclined. So when I was going to transition and made the case, where we both worked, I was able to say, hey, I know why we're winning, and I'm not getting from marketing the messaging to align to that. Can I just get that done? So that was kind of a unique way to get the worlds collided a little bit. But I think, as I said, it's a little bit of that bias from the sales organization, expecting that marketers don't really know what selling's about, unfairly. And then I think there's a little bit of the left brain, right brain that probably does keep a separation, because I think there are some separate skills.
Gotcha. And it's funny you mentioned the English degree. I believe we are both a fan of the Oxford comma. We've talked about that. So you other marketers out there, Let's maintain the Oxford comma.
Keep it alive.
Yeah. So listen, okay. So you talk about the bias, and our approach, I guess, today is what can we do to kind of break down those barriers between the two organizations and get marketing to understand what does sales really want from marketing. All right, are they expecting you just to throw as many leads over the fence as possible and help build their pipeline, or is there something else there? What is the sales leader, the sales organization, sales reps? Casey, I'm asking you, what does sales really want from marketing?
Yeah, good question. And honestly, I wish more marketers took that approach, Scott. As you and I even talked about the topic today, I think that's one of my first pieces of guidance is I think sales just wants to hear that there's a mindset from marketers that we're here to help. When marketers get too into their own agenda, too driven by data attribution, cost per lead metrics, justifying their budget, sales can start to shut down. They, in some ways, don't care about that. So I think we have to watch as marketers that we don't let our essential sort of numbers and quotas and budgets supersede the fact that marketing has arguably the most important number. I'm sorry, sales has the most important number in terms of the revenue that you're driving. So I think the attribution problem is an early problem. And in terms of a mindset, we can go more into this, but I'll just introduce the concept. I really think sales wants to hear that they recognize marketing is there to help them. If they can get that service provider concept, introduced to them, I think that's valuable right out of the outset so that sales can take a breath and go, okay, you're at least understanding that you're here to try to help me. And I think that's an initial baseline that can kind of break down some of the friction.
That's great. And where does it go from there? I mean, if you take that service provider mindset, marketing as a service provider to the sales organization, we're here to help you, work with you. How does that manifest in the day to day? What types of things do you think you would expect to see from the marketing team?
I think that it just allows the dialogue to then come at, to say, all right, I'm looking at my sales team or my process or my execution or my trade show follow-up or my emails or my sequences or all of them, the mechanics, but from a sales side, letting them say, I don't like that, our follow-up after the first meeting, I have no data sheet, or I don't have this asset. They can be tactical in some of the gaps, which can lead to good marketing, calendaring, and content creation. That's one tactical thing for sure. And I think the good marketing/sales enablement group is really going to ask about the key conversations that your sales team needs to have. What are the actual conversations? Are they not able to talk about that new product because we don't have the right messaging or visuals to support them? Are they getting hammered by a certain competitor that, they're scared to even talk about because they don't know the best way to defend themselves against that? Are we losing on price because we are, more expensive and there's a lesser one out there? We're better, but we're not doing value justifications. I think if you get into that kind of strategy work and then marketing can take that guidance and then go do the work on the visual, the asset, or sometimes, the messaging, now you've got a real partnership because you're problem solving, but you're getting your skill set valued by sales to say, hey, I'm just identifying what's not working. Can you help me fill that gap?
That's interesting. So the marketing, as you see it, the marketing organization's really a big function of what they do is to help sales feel more confident, more informed, be better sellers because of the information that they have at their fingertips, whether it's about, the competitive landscape, as you said, or specific use cases or what have you, right?
Yeah, I'm, in my practice, I've kind of, really gotten behind the concept of selling as a buyer's guide. And when my definition of that is it's not product pushing, it's the opposite of that. In fact, I don't want product pushing. And I think that's another observation that classically marketing, if product marketing takes over the marketing function and it's all about the product and the SKUs and the acronyms, that to me is not effective sales enablement. And that's probably a good distinction, under marketing, product marketing versus sales enablement. I would try to keep them, separated because sales enablement, I'm enabling my seller to go do their job. Well, I go one further. We're trying to enable that buyer to do their job, to be able to go make a case internally that they want to go with us as their provider. So what data do they need to do that? Well, if I'm selling to a very technical group and they've got to get security on board, and the first time that meeting happens without us in the room, they get hammered because they don't understand HIPAA or PII or something, they're not going to bring you back again because they got hammered. So you as the seller, as their guide, are saying, hey, Scott, before you go into that meeting with security, they're going to ask about our PII, proper procedures. They're ask about HIPAA. Here's the answers you have. In fact, here's an FAQ, right? Go calmly into that meeting and know that we've got that covered. You don't have to know everything, but just know we're not scared of that conversation. Well, did marketing give them that FAQ? Did marketing give them that asset? Did they prep them? So as a seller, I want to be able to sell that way. But if I lack the tools, or your point, the confidence, that conversation is not going to go great. So I think that's another interesting nuance of good marketing and enabling sort of that truly using sales enablement.
That's a great point, and it reminds me when I did. We had the opportunity to work together many years ago now, I guess. And one of the things that always impressed me about the work you did was how educated you were on in the individual use cases of each customer account, why they decided to purchase our product, our software. And it made me think, do you remember the movie Erin Brockovich with
Yep.
Julia Roberts? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're probably going back 20 plus years now, I guess. It's but for those who have seen the movie, Julia Roberts plays a woman who works for a law firm. She has no legal education or background, and she suddenly gets involved with representing something like 600 plaintiffs in a legal suit against PG&E. It's a whole water pollution issue that's causing health problems for the plaintiffs, and a massive lawsuit. And because she doesn't have that legal background, at one point they bring in sort of the hired gun, high priced lawyers to help consult and run the case. And they sort of are speaking condescendingly to her because of her background and saying, well, your research really isn't that thorough. I mean, look, you don't even have phone numbers for some of the clients that we need to go talk to. And she's like, just go ahead, ask me. You want their phone number? Ask me their phone number. She's like, well, you can't possibly know the phone number of all 600 clients. She's like, try me. And they open up to the middle of the book and they pick out a random plaintiff name. And she goes, oh yeah, that person's phone number is this. Her husband is this. They have 3 kids. All their phone numbers are this. These are the medical history of each of those people in their family, all their relatives, where they lived, what they work, what their careers were, their goals and aspirations. Like, she just rips it off real fast. And it was kind of that big mic drop moment. Like, man, what a lesson in being thorough. And I always thought, to your credit, it made an impression on me how thorough you were as a marketer and a salesperson in understanding the use cases. Not just, oh, this customer, whether it's, back in the day, it was Verizon Wireless or JP Morgan Chase or Apple. It wasn't they bought us because they wanted to cut costs or be more efficient or grow revenue. It was much more nuanced than that, right?
Yeah, and I thank you for comparing me to Julia Roberts. That's the first in my life I've ever been compared to her. I'm going to have to add my toothy smile to the rest of this podcast. But yeah, I appreciate that compliment because I work very hard on that and still do. I find that currency of the stories and the use cases and getting beyond the marketing language. That's another, interesting point here, that marketing talk or buzzwords or industry jargon or consultant language does not really help the sellers. And I challenge myself not to talk about, the granularity or the holistic nature of it, every other word that we want to throw out there, and to try to give specific examples and in some way pull it down a level to be using language that was easily translatable for the first time listener. Because my goal as a seller and a marketer is to create you, Scott, as a good internal seller of this concept that I'm trying to get you to become a fan of, to become an evangelist for. But if you get lost in the language and if you can't remember it, that's no good. So, the story is great because it has drama, it has a before, it has an after, and you can remember, oh, before you were deployed, they weren't able to do this, and after they were. So I just kept my antenna up for those. And I was on some of those sales calls. Some of those deals I actually sold too. So I had, good knowledge, but I sought that out because I knew in a situation, if you were considering going with us, if I could pull relevant examples and show you the similarities to that, what a great confidence boost for them to see we could handle the scale, or we could do the whatever the nuance was that you were worried about. We'd already done it with somebody else. And so as we've talked, I think that was as a sales leader in that particular moment, that was my value, to bring the broader global perspective to individual reps in their territories and to give them the chance to leverage those other wins as their own, because the company won them. They just might not have sold them themselves. But yeah, I think that use case is really critical, and the story element of it is so valuable to us as sellers because, again, it's a protection against getting too product focused in your talk.
So yeah, and when you get back to that, the overarching topic here of what does sales really want from marketing, having marketing being able to document those use cases, to educate them, present them back. talk through them, get the salesperson not just to be able to regurgitate what they read, but to really understand, right? I think that's probably a pretty big role of the marketing function.
Absolutely, I agree. And anytime I hear of someone starting to retell me the story and they go, "Oh, well, we store tons of data," I just write it down and let them finish, and I go back. So, as a person that just heard your story, am I going to go get my boss excited that you heard, I heard you store tons of data? They think they're selling, right? And I'm like, that's imminently forgettable. But I said, but if you can go back and say, oh, but this brand stored 8 years of launch data on the premiere of Game of Thrones and uses it in real time in a war room to watch the premiere of House of Dragons, so they know how many session counts are coming in. Do they need to auto provision more hosts? Suddenly someone's like, I'm in that moment with you, right? Like that's the next level that you have to get to. So I'm a bit of a pistol when I talk to teams about that, because if they get too high level, I'm just, it doesn't resonate. You've got to be better than that.
Yeah, I mean, they're in the moment with you, and certainly the credibility as a seller that you've just established goes up exponentially.
And credibility is key. And to me, the two C's of credibility and confidence. I'm establishing my own confidence in our story, but that confidence has a transferal. I describe it as I'm transferring that to you to allow you to go believe that you can tell this story too.
So let's switch gears here for a second. Why do you think that we hear it often that sales and marketing teams struggle to align? And maybe some of it's around just marketing not understanding what it is exactly that the sales team really needs from them. But what let's go a little deeper on that one. Why do you think historically sales and marketing have struggled to align?
I think there's, one at a psychological level where I think there's both a little bit of maybe a lack of respect for the other's craft. I think sales thinks marketing's kind of easy, and marketing might be like, oh, this should sell itself. Like you guys are overpaid for what you do too. I mean, how many times do you hear that? So and there may be kernels of truth in that. It's probably why it does persist. But I think that's kind of a foundational thing, that if it's allowed to propagate, or if leaders get a little bit like, oh, we're smarter than them, we'll tolerate them. Either way, I think that's a problem. I think you have to, from the top, push down the respect of like, oh, you think you could go do their job? Go take a quota. Go try. Go get 95 no's, on cold calls, and people hanging up and slamming the phone at you and telling you never to bother you again. You want that job? It's all yours. So, and the consensus building and relationship building and asking hard questions, as a proponent and a trainer of sellers, I ardently defend that it's a specialized skill set. But as we've said, having been also in the marketing camp, crafting a good message, evaluating the importance of each word, leveraging tools, understanding the spend, managing cost per lead, looking at the market, creating a very defendable story that stands up. And that's a real art too, because, bad sellers can sell a good product, right? The product can carry them, but marketers don't have, the same luxury in some ways. Like they are still going to be evaluated. How did I respond to that? What's going on? So if we don't tell the story well, a bad product, poorly marketed, won't have any success. So I think, as I said, there's just probably a need for a little bit more respect of the two sides. And if that's driven from the top down, and appreciation of like, wow, thank you for doing what you do, that's probably one strategy to try to, to overcome some of it.
Gotcha. Makes a lot of sense. I think maybe one of the other areas that I've seen, and you've probably seen this too, is sometimes there is a lack of agreement on what that ideal customer profile is. The people that marketing are going after aren't always the same people that the sales team's going after. And when you don't have that alignment, how many times have I seen, marketing's talking to one group while sales is off saying, well, this customer, this prospects, they told me they're interested in what we do. I know they're not exactly our typical customer, but they said they have money, they want to buy, they seem interested. I'm going to go spend a lot of my time cultivating that relationship. And when you don't, as you know, when you don't have that alignment, I think almost on the marketing side, you should be confident enough to say to the sales team, you should not pursue that. That is not who we're going after here, whether it's named accounts or just a demographic profile that you've established. Having consensus on that is so important for a successful sales and marketing motion. Would you agree?
100% agree. In fact, a couple of the projects that I get into, the ICP to me is the tip of the iceberg. Like we've got to get agreement on that as an organization because it dictates how we should market and who we should market to, and ultimately even how we should sell. So we've got to, and I think, leveraging a maturity curve visual is really valuable to get that sense of like, where are we in the sophistication curve of who we want to sell to? And, my ICP models probably go like 40 metric deeps. A lot of people will say, oh, revenue and size and these two products installed. Well, I like to look for tolerance to risk, early adopters. I'd like to go to the whole, deeper level. So now as a seller, I can start to say, have you bought a vendor of our size? We're a 5 million a year ARR software vendor. Does that scare you? Like that may end your call right then for some people, so, but if it doesn't, you're in. Okay. So we've got to know what we're bringing to the dance and then, also understand them, but training the sellers to understand that and to qualify out, which is a skill they don't do well in general. We don't do well because like you said, if someone wants to keep talking to me, and at least I have something to put on the board for activity, even though it's probably not a convertible sale, that's really hard to get them to bounce out. But the good sellers, they challenge you early. They will come at you and say, you're not like my typical buyer. I mean, I want to keep talking to you, but tell me how you think this is going to play out. Oh, no, I know. I understand you from the outside. You could see that we're this, but we're actually about to launch this, or we're more like an MSP than you thought. Okay, I need to get that, conversion in their mind to realize that they know they're not my perfect date, but they see a fit. If I get that, that's okay. But that takes courage and confidence as a seller because I'm basically saying, I don't think we're a fit.
Great. Hey, I want to present a specific scenario to you that I think is indicative of marketing not always knowing what exactly sales wants or needs from them, and it's around something we both have experience with, which is marketing and selling at trade shows, conferences, large scale events, where too many times in my career I've seen the marketing team. They put together a really nice trade show booth. They put together some shiny collateral and printed sheets, and they get the business cards and they ship it all in a box. And the salesperson shows up at the event. They unbox it. They set it up, and then they just smile and shake hands and try to attract an audience. Maybe there's a marketing sponsored giveaway or something like that, but I don't always see that as a well-aligned event or campaign between sales and marketing. So from your perspective, in that scenario, what does sales really need from marketing in an event-based scenario like that to be successful?
Good question. I find the pre-work for the trade show is often neglected. To your point, marketing sets the calendar, marketing makes sure the booth gets there, they ship the giveaways, they make sure you do a good lead capture, and then they distribute the spreadsheet after, right? Kind of blocking and tackling. But I think it's very valuable to get even 2 weeks out and to have the talking points practice to say, like a stump speech for, political campaigns. What is our talking point for this show? What is the highlight? Oh, we're going to a VM focused show. Okay, we've got to be virtualization, or we're going to this more security focused show, or this is a generalist, or it's a Cisco show, whatever it might be. So we've got to tailor our story to that. 80% of the story should stay the same, but we've got to be able to say, what type of buyers are we expecting? Where do we want to drive the conversation? And I am a big believer that you've got to spark a curiosity gap, in those buyers, even in that first interaction. You got to get them thinking, I'm not hearing that from other people. I want to learn more. So, and it's got to be short and sweet too, because it's a speed date, as you know. But I think that pre-work of getting on the phone with the reps and saying, practice your who we are intro right now. Go, Scott, give me the 20-second. What are you here? What am I going to learn today? And we've got to have that crisp before, because then the reps are more confident in it. And then they're going to be more outgoing, because how many times have you had trade shows where the reps just stand around and they're counting ceiling tiles and they don't even want to talk to people? Oh, you want to talk to us? We'll talk to you. But a good hawker, a good puller in, someone that's energized to tell the story makes all the difference, because they're at the show. They have some interest in learning, but sometimes they need to get drawn in too. And if I feel like I have a good story to tell, I'm going to do a better job at that. So that's one specific gap I see, just that pre-work of getting, kind of the talking points nailed even before you get to the show.
100%. That pre-work is so crucial, and not even beyond the talking points, understanding who does sales want to talk to when they're there. Are there specific accounts or people that the marketing team can help do outreach ahead of time and do appointment scheduling? Let's get them to commit to come talk to us. before we've even gone to the show. Let's set and then sales is suddenly saying, "Wow, they scheduled meetings for me at the show." And then what happens post show, right? So you focus on the pre show. What about post show? What's the nurture that takes place? Who's responsible for taking the next step with each of these leads or contacts? Which ones are considered kind of the hot ones that we want to go after? Who's calling up, and what are they calling or following up with? All of that, I think, it's a much broader spectrum than just the event itself. So
Yeah,
great point. Yeah.
Yeah, and good follow on by you, because that makes me think too that, I'm fine with marketing being really demanding of the sellers if marketing has worked really hard on their part of it too, right? Did we build a sequence that you just had to put people into? Did we do the prep work on the pre-call? Did we make it real easy for you to say, and now you have to just go do your job? Yeah, now I'm going to be in your face if you haven't touched those people twice in the first week after the show or whatever it be. But if it's kind of a mail-in effort from marketing, and then they're just going to get, harpooned from a distance because they're not banging out 100 cold calls a day, that's hard. But if you've done everything to make it, stone simple, I think you can leverage the sales managers to be like, do you know what we spent on that show? Like we put a lot of investment in that. We need to see 3x pipeline growth on that. That's on you guys now. We can't make the calls for you. So I think that you get more accountability as a marketer, a better chance to be more accountable if you've put your effort in too.
Great. So Casey, let me ask you, what about pet peeves that sales teams have of marketing? And you've probably mentioned a couple here and there already, but is there anything that comes to mind, things that if marketing does, it's likely to result in sales feeling annoyed or they don't understand my world?
Yeah, the attribution one has been a pet peeve of mine, where excessive data entry requirements, so that marketing can backtrack to every lead ever possibly being touched by them, as attributable to their efforts. That just to me feels like wasted effort. I appreciate that marketing needs to justify the cost, but if you're tripping up a salesperson for how many fields they have to put into a CRM and just creating excessive data entry, I don't find that work really very valuable. And that's why I try to ascribe to the roll up of pipeline creation should be a shared metric that we both care about from sales and marketing. So that's sort of my response to that. So that's definitely a pet peeve. And then I think, like we said earlier too, that sort of sometimes lack of respect for what the other person is doing. Like, oh, anyone could have sold that, or oh, what did marketing really do here? I think that's probably a pet peeve of mine is too. Let me think if there's anything else.
Well, I'll tell you, when you mention this, I'm just going to jump in for a second because two of those things you said were actually discussed during the very first episode of this B2B Marketing Playbook podcast. Spoke to a gentleman, CMO, who said how important it is. The most important marketing metric that you should be looking at is pipeline generation and aligning the sales and marketing team behind pipeline, which you just brought up. And he said, actually, when it came to attribution, while he does measure it because he needs to understand, what tactics and offers are influencing revenue creation, he never anymore, very rarely, will ever mention the word attribution in a sales meeting with the marketing team for just that reason. So I think it's great to hear that coming from others as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just feels like it's selfish to them to be like, oh, you're justifying what you need. But if it's, I think we've hit that point. Yep.
Yeah. So hey, what else? What else can marketing be doing that sales needs? What are other things that can help them align better and achieve their goals? I know you're a very big proponent of playbooks. You might have mentioned that, but maybe want to talk a little bit more about that, or is there something else that you'd like to say that you think?
Yeah, I think the playbook concept is good, but what works within the playbook for me is, I try to look for, because playbooks to me are a precursor to training, and I'm a pretty training focused sales leader. I think I'm looking for the conversations that aren't happening, or we're not equipped to happen, or we're scared to happen, in the sales process. And I try to increase conversion rates by saying, look, if they want to buy you and you have the best product, great. You don't need much help from anybody, right? But, how do I get the revenue lift when someone's in that next category? How do you and I overcome that 60% of enterprise sales end in no decision right now? So nobody won. So that to me is my keep me up at night, like as a sales and marketing leader. How am I trying to improve that? Because if I can chip that down, I'm going to get better revenue for my clients in this case. So I try to think of, all right, what can be repeatable and trainable, and how do I expand the comfort zones of these sellers because they stop learning at some point, right? There's that curse of knowledge that, other authors have talked about, where after you get into a job for a while, you think you know it. You don't listen to customers as well. You don't listen to your own marketing and product as well, because you kind of feel like you know where the conversation is going. I want to disrupt that and have them realize, oh, like, I don't know if you would remember this, but when we worked together, I challenged the sales team. I gave them a matrix. I said, I think we do about 12 things really well. They're on a spreadsheet. Go to your top 5 customers and find out what they're doing across these 12 things. And, there's a little hemming and hawing and bitching, and you get 2 weeks, come back. Every single rep came back and like, did you know that they didn't know that we did this, we did that, we did this? And I was like, yes, I did. That's why we did this, right? So, I think there's a chance to break them out of their comfort zone, because they weren't talking about product capabilities. They were already making their numbers selling core potentially, but they weren't getting as sticky by selling the other things. And maybe if there was a solution or a platform, sale behind that too. So I think the playbook can bring that best practice, and then can get you as a seller to realize, I wanted you just to feel like the most dangerous salesperson, because I could go in and say, I can find an attach point, right? I'm going to be really able to listen. Okay, maybe it's just this little server use case over here, but I get my foot in the door. But if I'm not adept at all 10 of those use cases and sales plays, then I'm going to miss. So that's my, sort of overall goal, is to say, as sellers, we've got to be capable of telling multiple stories, and okay, going down all those paths, confident, technically acumen, and connecting it to their business outcomes as well, so that they see this is worth the time. Your and my challenge is to get all these things above that line of nice to have, to become a have to have. And as sellers and marketers, if I don't feel like this is really an insightful, powerful thing, and I can't talk about 3 businesses that got transformed by it, I'm going to be maybe a little more timid about pushing that CIO to really listen to me in that moment, because I don't know if it's true, but if I've got confidence that it does, and I can say, hey, I'm now a consultant, I can get paid for my expertise in this space, I'm going to have more confidence in that moment. And I think, again, the playbook to drive that consultative selling and to really give you the content to do that is critical.
And I love that you talk about just the need to constantly break what you think is true about your business, the sales process. And it applies to the marketing camp as well. I've always advocated, as do many, of course, marketers should be constantly listening in on sales conversations, sales introductory calls, first calls, closing calls, whatever you can. And you don't have to be on the call if there's a tool like gong.io or something like that, where you can go back and listen to recordings, skim through, play it back at 4x speed. You can still kind of hear the essence of the conversation, because it not only gives you a better appreciation for what the sales reps are dealing with, but suddenly you hear those questions being asked by the prospect. And that is a great feeder for content ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I've heard this on 3 different calls. Somebody's asked this: why don't we have a blog post about it? Why don't we do a webinar or a white paper or a video or something, an infographic, anything that would help educate them before they even get to the sales rep, so they know the answer to that question already.
100%.
So yeah, I think it certainly applies to both camps. So let's kind of summarize this then, talking today, and what sales really wants from marketing. If you were coming into a new organization representing the marketing camp, what's one of the first things you would do to help establish that service provider mindset and credibility with the sales team?
I would try to get to the sales leaders to say, where do we need to start? I would check my own assumptions and, pro formas, and just say, where do you feel like you need the most help? What is working, so that we don't lose that? What are the gaps that you want us to fill? And just establish that, like, I'm not coming in with a strong agenda. I am coming here to hear what you need. And I think if they hear that tone of helpfulness, that's the place to start. And then, just establish that partnership, right out of the gate. To your point, get on the, sales calls to hear why are we winning, why do we think, do your ICP work, start to get your fundamentals in place, and then look for the change events. I want to bring a before and after. Okay, what do we need to be doing, better that we're not doing? What conversations aren't happening that need to happen? And then you put your programs in place. And again, yeah, I default to a lot of training, but if the good content is there, smart sellers will appreciate it. And I think sometimes, bringing the horse to water or whatever the right metaphor would be, like, I think you don't have to force. Like, I like putting assets out to the team, and I don't mandate that they use it. But I look and watch for a week or two, which reps come back and say, hey, what's this or what's that? Or I didn't like this slide or whatever. I'm like, okay, they're using it, So if it's good content, it should stand on its own. It shouldn't be whipped, for them to be forced to use. So I want to have marketing have that same ability to say, we're going to give you a lot of things, and we're not going to tell you they're all awesome. We're going to get some stuff right. We're going to get some stuff wrong, but we're going to pay close attention to which ones are getting used. And, are they walking into a meeting with a sheet that we gave them to? That's a huge win, right? Are they, taking an email and having success with it? Okay, we're going to track that too. So I don't know, kind of a broad-based answer there, but I think starting from, hey, I'm here to help, and then being open to learn and not being rigid, but then also earning accountability back to sales, because we started with this partnering attitude of like, hey, you told me you needed this, I did it, now you do your part. I think that gets you what you want ultimately, which is the chance to be balanced with sales.
Well, it's fantastic advice based off many years of experience. So I really appreciate you sharing that with the audience today. Before we let you go, I got to ask you the same three questions that I ask of all of our guests, starting with, what's the best marketing advice, Casey, that you have ever received?
It actually just came to me as I was making that last point, because it's funny, I knew that question was coming. And I think marketing puts a lot of pressure on brevity. And I was raised in a house where my whole family said, if it takes 2 words to say it, there's 1 word that says it better. But I have found that good marketing content does not have to be super brief. Readers will give you more time if the topic is of interest. So don't beat ourselves up that everything's got to be bulleted and assume that we're reading it on the phone. Yes, there's a truth to that too, but long form, good content still, I think, has a tremendous play in the market. Look how much research our buyers do without us in even the process, right? They're on the internet, they're reading blogs. So don't go so short that an educated, motivated buyer can't get what they need to learn. And I think that's a freedom that we've got to remind ourselves on the marketing side that, yes, there's a premium on that in certain situations, but don't be afraid of long form.
Yeah, and I was just talking to a client the other day. We were agreeing, if you come into some of these engagements with the agency written SEO optimized marketing fluff, marketing jargon piece that you kind of referenced before, buyers see through that pretty quickly, and you lose credibility. Right. So there is a time to be brief, but there is a time where you need to really peel back the onion and get deeper. So completely agree. What about, are there any specific marketing technologies, tools that you've fallen in love with over the years? Anything that you feel has been very effective for the teams that you've led?
Um, I've become a HubSpot fan just from its Swiss Army nature, its ease of use, its knowledge center. I've taken Salesforce out of a couple clients at this point because I find it unwieldy and expensive, and I don't get a lot of value out of the reporting from it. So the ecosystem is obviously unbelievable, but if I had to pick one, I would say HubSpot. You can forecast in it, you can run your deals, you can do digital marketing, you can do website tracking, you can do chat. I mean, there's not much it doesn't do. So I hold HubSpot up as probably the best starter kit for anyone who's kind of trying to do a digital marketing effort, and even for bigger companies. So I'm pretty impressed with them as a company.
Fantastic. And finally, I often run start-stop exercises with my teams. So we're going to do it here. What's one thing that you would say marketing professionals need to stop doing, and one thing they need to start doing more of?
On the stop, I would just watch letting industry analyst pressure govern your talk tracks. If you find yourself starting to use terms or language that doesn't feel right, but you're catering to, the industry analysts of the world, I've watched some clients kind of go down that path, and the drift between what the salespeople are actually doing, seeing, and marketing becomes wide. And suddenly you go to the website and you just had a sales call with the company, and you're like, wait, is this the same company? This is not how you were talking about what was going on. So that would be one stop. I would just be cautious about letting industry analysts speak govern your messaging.
And it's great that you say that, because I actually have an upcoming episode of the B2B Marketing Playbook where we're talking to a former analyst and somebody who's head up business units and has worked on both sides, right? He's both pitched to analysts and he's been an analyst. So I'm going to press him on that and see what he says. But I love the advice. Thank you.
Good. And if I need to start doing more of, yeah, I guess it's back to the same thing of just, that service provider approach of getting to sales to say we're here to help, and, being a listener and checking your own preconceived notions of how things should go. I mean, you've got a really good marketing to me. You need to read so many factors of, why are we winning? Are we a commodity play? Are we winning on price? Are we the best technology? Can we leverage a true value proposition? How many steps in the sale? How many buyers? How long is the sales cycle? What's the maturity curve of our ICP? It's a calculus experiment. And, if you come in and you're rigid, I would say if you're a stamp it out, I know how to do this, I struggle with that. And I know in my practice of playbooks, it's not scalable, but I still prefer it. I go and say, look, I don't know how we're going to solve this. I need to, learn, get on sales calls, start my discovery process, and then I'm going to start to shape what I think is the best and repeatable and strongest approach to building a win argument that's really defensible, but it's not a cookie cutter. So I would say be more open to, just reading the situation and tailoring your efforts would be my start recommendation.
100%. Casey, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to remind everybody briefly that this video podcast series is hosted by Tidewater CMO, fractional marketing CMO services for B2B SaaS tech software companies in the lower end of the market, small mid-market, and be happy to engage with you guys if you have any questions. I'm sure Casey would be happy to engage as well. Check him out at the Virtual CRO. You can find him on LinkedIn. He's got a website out there. If you're interested in connecting with Casey, I'm sure he'd be open to it. And Casey, I just want to thank you very much. Your thoroughness certainly comes through in the interview, and I appreciate your sharing your thoughts with our audience today.
Oh, I'm flattered. Thank you so much for the invite. It's great for you and I to connect again. I think you're doing a great job with this. And I'm tickled to have the opportunity to talk. And thank you for the opportunity. This was fun.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.